when you were in Jonesboro earlier this year and you were being interviewed on stage, you were asked who among your female co-stars was your favorite. And everybody was thrilled to hear that you said Sally Field. Could you talk about her qualities as an actor that you responded to?
Well, I always felt that she was way beyond the Flying Nun and that stuff. And but when I brought her name up, I was fought a little bit by the studio and people, and I said, "You guys don't know what there is there. That's a well that hasn't been hit yet, but when it does, it's going to explode." And it has. I mean, I was going with her, and I kept looking at her mantelpiece, and I said, "You know, I'm feeling like a real slob. I have nothing on my mantelpiece." And she had 5 awards, every kind there is, and 2 Oscars now, I think. And she's just an amazing girl. But what she has that's surprising is the power inside of her, because she's a little thing, and she just when she wants to can overpower everybody.
Did she have any kind of influence over your choices? Because in that period, because it really feels like, you know, with movies like Best Friends and Starting Over in particular, but also even something like The End, or Hooper. There's a difference in quality there that's notable. Did she advise you in any ways on you know, scripts to respond favorably to or anything?
No, she didn't. She did, Dean. She left me. I was the director. She has great respect for directors anyway, and she just, you know, I don't think I can never remember us having a discussion over one particular scene that she felt wasn't right or whatever, and when I wanted to change things, she was wonderful about it. She was just a terrific actress, besides being a terrific lady.
I want to talk about a movie that predates some of these that we're going to discuss. I read somewhere, I don't know if this comes from one of your memoirs or so forth, but I read somewhere that one of your favorites, if not your favorite, of all of your movies is W.W. and the Dixie Dance Kings, which was directed by John Avildsen, who also directed Rocky the year after, won an Oscar for that. Is this the case? And can you tell me why that's one of your favorites?
It wasn't. I don't believe it was my favorite, but I think that John Avildsen and I went round and round a couple times on the picture we did do together, and if that was it, then he was right and I was wrong. I remember the funniest part was, it's funny now, but it wasn't then, was he said to Mel Tillis, okay, that was a good rehearsal, and Mel, cut the stutter. And I said, what? He said, cut the stutter. And I said, yeah, and I said, listen, come with me. I want to talk to you. And I went around behind the garage, and I pushed him up against the garage and hung him on a nail there. And I said, how dare you take a man who's just such a wonderful talent, a giant here in Nashville, and has been for years, and he's an amazing talent, and I'm so proud to have him in a picture, and I used him in 3, And I can't believe you did that. Well, anyway, it went on and on and on. Finally, I took him off the hook, and we walked back around in front, and we started to do this scene, and he didn't stutter. And I said, damn it. I said, what are you doing to me? I just took him around the back and was giving you hell because you can't help it. You stutter, and now you're not stuttering. And he said, well, I drank. You did? I said, you did what? And they'd gotten him a fifth of something, and I guess he just chug-a-lugged it, and he doesn't stutter then.
Wow. Obviously Avildsen screwed with his process in some ways. So I love that movie. I love the cast in the movie, Connie Van Dyke and the late Don Williams, and of course James Hampton and so forth. They're all so great in it, and you're terrific in it. But the music by Jerry Reed is so wonderful. I'm interested to hear you talk about Jerry Reed and your relationship with him, which really goes over a good number of your movies.
He was. I don't know why I felt that. The first time I saw him at the Grand Ole Opry, I just knew he could act, and I asked him. I said, "Would you be interested in being in a movie with me?" And he said, "Well, son, I don't do what?" I said, "Act." And he said, "Well, son, I could sing, but I don't know about acting." I said, "I'm telling you, you can act." And after a few talks like that, he said, "Okay." And the first time he opened his mouth, I knew I was right, because he talked faster than you could type anything, and he was just so much fun for everybody, for the crew and for the rest of the cast. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man. Besides being such a wonderful actor, he was considered to be the best guitar player in Nashville, and there's some pretty good pickers there.
Yeah, there's a few there. Yeah, I love his ability. I get the sense in your movies that he's really throwing in a lot of quality to the screenplay that maybe wasn't on the page. Is that correct?
Yeah. I told him anytime he felt like something had to come out of his mouth, just to let it happen. And we came around, and he hadn't seen the Trans Am, and I opened the back of the big truck, and they backed it down, and he looked at it. He hadn't said a word. He just was speechless. And then he said, "Honey, hush." So that became one of our things, his old picture.
Oh man, he's great in those in your movies. He's just fantastic. I want to talk about also your, as kind of a springboard into some other things. You're a major figure in Georgia film. I mean, you broke the ground, and now, although these many years later, here we are in November of 2017, and there's almost 50 productions being filmed here in and around Atlanta, or in Georgia in general.
I was going to do 4 of those pictures in Florida. The governor just didn't want any of them, and was not very nice about Governor Askew. It was not very nice about the way he said no. And as a matter of fact, he said, "I don't like your films, Mr. Reynolds. I don't think they should play." And wow. I said, "Well, I don't like you being governor. With nothing I could do about it." So and I left and went to Georgia, and at the time, Jimmy Carter was the governor, he couldn't have been nicer. And he said, "What prison do you want to shoot in?" I said, "Well, I'd like to shoot in the baddest one in the state." And he said, "Well, we'll have to move a few people around, but we'll do that." And that's what he did, and it was amazing, amazing. You know, I got to know all those guys, and I never met a guy in prison that was guilty. You know, there never is. they,
yeah, no, all the men in prison are innocent. Yes,
gotta be one of them. Well, one time I'm in Nashville. I was in Nashville shooting, and at that time I had 5, police officers around the trailer, and I don't have that anymore, but at the time I did. And one of them came in and said, "Mr. Reynolds, there's a guy out here. He says you know him, and his name is Ringo." And I said, "Ringo?" And now I only knew one Ringo, and that was I met at the prison. I said, "Oh, well, have him come in." And he came in, and I said, "Ringo, boy, I'm glad to see you, son. Did you get off for good behavior or something, or what?" He said, "No, I just got out." I said, "Oh, my Lord." And he said, "You think I could have a little money?" I said, "Yeah." And I thought, well, that's aiding and abetting, and I didn't want to get caught for that. I said, "You know who loves you, and it's just across the street, is Jimmy Hampton." And he said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Oh, man, he'll be glad to see you. And I'll see if I can dig up some bed for you. But go over and see Jimmy." And he did. And he came back a little while later, and he said, "That's all right. Jimmy gave me some money, and I'm in good shape now." I said, "Well, don't get in trouble now anymore, okay?" And he said, "I'll do my best." And he left, and he stayed out for a good year, I think, before they did catch him. Sometimes there really are some good guys in there that you hope are not. That's not going to happen. Another time I went to Leavenworth, and I did a show there, and Dinah went with me, and there was about 6 of us in the show. Merle Haggard and Jonathan Winters, and it was an incredible cast. And we got in there, and everything was going fine. We were rehearsing, and I had a band from there mixed in with some band guys I brought from her show. And I said, where is Dinah? And they said, "I don't know. Where is she?" I said, "What?" And they didn't know where she was. And I said, "We got to find her, guys. This is not, this is not Atlanta." So we were hunting all over the place, and she was in the worst section of Leavenworth that you could be. And she was sitting there, a cappella, no guitar, nothing, singing a song to these guys, and they were just enthralled. And I said,
"Wow,
honey, we gotta rehearse now." And I said, "I hope you guys don't mind. I got to take her back to rehearsing." They said, "No, we appreciate it, and we know we're special because nobody else got a private showing like this." And I said, "That's right, they didn't." And I said, "What in the world possessed you to come down here?" She said, "Well, they told me that those guys never get anybody. They don't get to see any shows, and they don't get nothing. So I went down there."
It's amazing. I mean, it's funny. The Longest Yard to me is really a major film for you. It feels very personal. It also feels like a kind of a note of a sea change in terms of your career, because it feels like there's more humor introduced in that movie than any other of the previous movies.
Yes,
I
true.
mean, maybe with the exception of White Lightning, which might have some humor in it too. But The Longest Yard seems to be like a key film in your career. Do you feel that same way?
I do, absolutely. It's my favorite movie that I did, and I felt like every time I sat down with some jocks and ball players of any kind, basketball, baseball, football, that's the movie they talk about, and I feel great about that. It was a wonderful movie, and you know, it was my dream. I got to play football and get paid for it. You know, it was wonderful.
Right. I mean, I know you. Of course, you were a football star in college, and so forth. Had to get out because of damage to your knees and everything. But was The Longest Yard kind of taxing for you in terms of that physically?
It was tough. Yeah, it was tough. But I truthfully, I never had so much fun in my life on a picture. And when the film was over, Ray Nitsky, who hit me so hard a few times I thought my head was going to come off, he walked up to me and he said, buddy, you can play this game. And that was like an Oscar. I'm telling you, I've never been so touched in my life.
Wow. Well, it's a fantastic movie. I'm not even a football fan. I'm a movie fan. That's what I do. But as football movies go, it's the greatest football movie ever made, if you ask me.
Oh,
thank you. In terms of understanding the game, understanding the passion behind it, and then the filming of it, the editing, the Oscar-nominated editing, the split screen, the sound, the incredible cast, and the verisimilitude of being in that prison and that place is just is breathtaking. I mean, Robert Aldrich really went the extra yard, pardon the pun, in that film. And I'm curious. You've worked with so many great directors. I mean, the list can go on and on. Everybody from Sam Fuller to Aldrich to Robert Altman to so many. I mean, Woody Allen, Mel Brooks. Are there any filmmakers out there that you feel influenced your own directorial style?
If anything, they made me feel like I was doing the right thing. I was a big fan of every one of those people, and some of them had, idiosyncrasies that were pretty hysterical. But Orson Welles and John Ford both told me that they liked the films I did, and that didn't get any better than that. I remember I said to each guy, play it like it was the real deal. Well, Sam Fuller, I didn't know, but he told me or warned me about it. But it didn't matter whether you were doing a love scene or some other kind of scene. Instead of action, he shot a gun off. And you'd be standing there, and you'd jump about 3 feet in the air. Well, this went on for about 2 days, and then finally I went up to him. I said, Sam, I don't want to stop you from doing what you're doing because you're doing a great job and everything, but could you not shoot the gun off when I'm doing a love scene? And he said, I don't know. That's kind of what I do. I said, well, he says what I feel at, when I'm making love. I said, well, maybe it works for you. I don't know.
Oh, man. No, you mentioned Orson Welles. Can you talk about meeting with him? What were the circumstances there?
I've had great meetings with him, and fun times and talking about, the things that he literally invented so many things, and the cameraman he had was genius. He also was so complimentary. I mean, it made me feel, like $1 billion that he felt the way he did about the films, and that's what it's all about. And it's people like you that say the things you do. I mean, you don't just piss it off. You talk about the films, and you picked out the films that I would pick out if I had to pick out the ones that I thought were the best. And I can't tell you how much that means to me.
Well, I mean, it really comes from the heart from I think everybody who loves your movies, and I want to talk about some of the other films. These are some of my absolute favorites of your works. So I picked 5 of them, and I want to talk about each one of them, if you don't mind. I want to start off by talking about The End, which I rewatched last night. It's absolutely one of my favorites of your movies. I find that Jerry Belson script to be, of course, hilarious, but also so incredibly dark. I want to know what attracted you to that project.
Well, first of all, nobody would okay it. The studios were scared to death of it, and but I made a deal with Warner Brothers that if they let me do it, I would do whatever they wanted me to do. I'd own one, and that's the way we worked it. And I remember it was such a dangerous film. I mean, in every way, and yet laughs. My God, there were laughs. And then we go on, and then we'd somehow keep going, and who would have thought you'd get Joanne Woodward in a place like that? I mean, it was, and she was wonderful. She was just wonderful to act with.
Now she was instrumental in helping you in your early career, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. She was. She had come to summer stock when I was doing summer stock in upper state New York, and I had fallen in like with her, and I really had a crush, and I thought, well, I can't wait to take a run at her, boy. And she said, my fiance's coming up this weekend, and he wants to meet you. And then I thought, well, I'll just blow him out of the tub. And this guy came walking in, and with the bluest eyes I'd ever seen in my life. And I thought, I don't know which one of them I like the best.
They were a dream couple. She and Paul Newman. There's no question. And an incredible marriage. So yeah, you didn't have a shot. I'm sorry, Burt.
I didn't have a shot. I knew it as soon as I saw him walk in the door.
Of course, with The End, one of the most valuable players, I would say, in that movie is absolutely Dom DeLuise. And
he should have been nominated. You know that?
He should have been. Absolutely.
They don't do that, Dean. I don't know why they just don't do that in comedies and stuff.
Very rare. But he was so great in that movie. That scene where we're introduced to him, it's a long scene. It's like a 10-minute scene. But he controls that so brilliantly. He is so freaking funny. How did you keep it together with him?
No, I know. When he went up to the bathroom, and I was in the bathroom, he wanted to come in. And all that's him. I mean, that's all his. I'd like to take credit for some of it, but none of it's mine. It's him. he went to knock on the door and then.
Oh yeah, and he wipes the knock off. He's trying to wipe the knock away.
And then he rubs it out.
And then that line where he says he pees a lot. Oh my God, it's so funny. He is so great. Can you talk about him? Because I mean, I met his son once at a film festival and heard great stories from him. But I'm sure you must have at least one fantastic
every day that I saw him, he made me laugh. Every day of my life now, I think about him. I will never have, and he never got the credit. We'll never have a comedian like that. He was a true clown he loved doing it. You know, that was the thing that I don't think a lot of comedians do. But when we would go out to eat, I'd say now, John, we got to leave the restaurant by, a certain time. We have to be back to the set. He said, yeah. The first thing he'd do when we walked in the restaurant, he'd go to every single table and introduce himself and tell them, ask them where they were from. And I thought, what in the hell is he doing? And after that, I got used to it. I mean, that was him. He loved people, and he loved to make them laugh.
Yeah, he's what a talent. There's not another like him, that's for sure. I mean, also with the end, such an incredible cast. Robbie Benson and Kristen McNichol and Strother Martin and David Steinberg. So many great people. But then you get that fantastic scene with Pat O'Brien and Myrna Loy as your parents. It's just so amazing. Can you talk about working with them?
Well, I truly did have a love affair with her. I mean, she was I had such a crush on her, and I asked her, "Can we get your guy? I mean, the guy that he made." William Powell, that you guys made so many pictures, and she said, gosh, I don't know. He's not been feeling well, but let's call him up. Well, I forget that she could call him up. I couldn't. She called Palm Springs, and he was there, and he got on the phone, and she said, Burt Reynolds wants you to be in this picture. And he got on the phone, and his voice sounded weak, and he said, I can't do it, Burt, but I'd sure love to, and you'll be able to find somebody. Everybody wants to work with Bernard. And he said, you won't have any trouble, but he said, I'm sure proud you asked me. And it got tears to my eyes. I thought, here's a guy that, the two of them were, like Olivier and Vivian Lee.
And, yes. I mean, that's amazing. I think you did well with Pat O'Brien, though. He's incredibly funny in it.
He was great. He brought a different kind of comedy. It was his staccato way of doing some lines. When he was doing the numbers on the art. 11, 11, 11, 11, 11, 11. Well, yeah, that's a totally different kind of comedy than our other guy would have done, but that's all right. It was sensational.
Yeah, it's fantastic because that character is kind of in his own world in some ways, so that's perfect in that way. I find the end to be an incredibly it should be talked about a lot more. I think a lot of people need to see it a lot more. I would recommend to the listeners to go and check it out immediately. Another film that got a lot more acclaim was Starting Over.
Yes.
Alan Pakula's movie with the James L. Brooks script. And you had two great female leads in that movie with Candice Bergen and of course, Jill Clayburgh. What are your feelings about that film these days?
Well, I don't know how I got those two. It was amazing. They were both fabulous. I remember Candace said, I just, when I sing, I sound awful. I said, Candace, sing out, Louise. I mean, sing it out. The longer you sing and the louder you sing, the bigger the laughs. And she said, really? I said, yes. Sing it like it's great. I mean, it sounds good to me, but then I can't sing either. And she said, okay. And, well, I mean, it was the biggest laugh in the picture.
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, that moment when you're getting back together again in that bedroom, and you come up behind her and just touch her shoulder, and she just sort of moans. You're like, wow, that's all it takes. That's one of my favorite things in the movie. But my favorite scene in the movie is the probably everybody's favorite scene is the dunking scene with Jill Clayburgh, which she's you're both hilarious in that scene, but she is particularly great in it. When you're throwing those balls at the thing and she finally goes in a number of times, is extraordinary. Can you talk about filming that scene?
Well, she was, oh God, she was so sweet and so a wonderful actress. I remember so many scenes with her that one, which is kind of strange, but she was standing with me, and she was screaming at me, and some snot came out of her nose, and was about, I'm not kidding, it was about 1.5 feet long. And I couldn't believe what I was looking at, and I thought surely, Howes will cut, we'll choose another. And he didn't. He went, let's move, let's cut, move. I said, Alan, what about the snot? He said, you couldn't get anybody to do that in a million years. Like she did it.
It's in the movie, isn't it? Is it not?
Oh yeah, you bet it is.
Yes, I remember it now.
I hear people all around me when that happens.
Yeah, because it's out in the cold. You were filming out in the cold
Buffalo.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
Buffalo has got to be the coldest city in America.
Is that where you went? Is Buffalo the same town where you went to shoot some of the scenes for Best Friends? Those scenes with.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so you kind of went revisited that area quite a bit, and so that leads me to Best Friends.
You do that a lot. You do that a lot with movies, I think, when you go somewhere for a certain reason, and it's not just the cold weather. It's that what it brings out in you. It brings your best work, and I'm so cold-blooded anyway. I mean, I can't stand cold weather, and it was great. Georgia is my good luck state. But Buffalo, if I want to be freezy to death, I go there.
Well, that's another one of my favorite of your movies. Again, you have a great script by Barry Levinson and Valerie Curtin, who's also in the movie, and I also think that's criminally underrated. I think your chemistry with Goldie Hawn is fantastic. And particularly those scenes with the parents, the ones in Buffalo with Jessica Tandy and Bernard Hughes, and then the ones down south with Audra Lindley and Keenan Wynn are just magic.
I think Goldie was at her best in that picture that I did with her. She was by far the best actress I've ever worked with in terms of just being right on the beam all the time, and never complained, never bitched. And it was cold, man, it was cold, but she was wonderful to work with. And it started to rain, pour down rain, and it looks like a rain machine because you don't see rain usually. And it was she's kind of like the female version of Goldie, of Dom, in that if she finds a laugh, she'll take it to the ends of the earth, And I'm nuts about her. I met her husband recently at a party with her, and he gave me the worst looks I've ever gotten in my life, and I thought, well, I guess that's a compliment. I don't know.
One of my favorite things in Best Friends is that moment where she's feeling sort of guilty about something, like an argument, or she feels that she's wrong, and she tells you to crack an egg, and she says, crack an egg, and you do the egg cracking thing over her head. It's so great. Who came up with that?
That was her. It was totally her. It wasn't even the script, and unfortunately, I think I did it too hard, and she, the director, God love him, said, "Oh God, that was great. Can we do one more?" And she said, "No." But I hit her in the middle of the forehead, and I didn't mean to do it that hard, but I did, and it just, I thought she was going to faint.
I just love that movie. It's so fantastic. Again, another movie that if you've never seen it, to the listeners, you've got to watch it. It's fantastic. Norman Jewison is the director. Okay, so now I'll move on to Sharky's Machine, which I still consider to be one of the two greatest movies ever filmed in Atlanta, and the other one would be a movie that you might not have seen called Marvin and Tige, which was done here in '83. An indie movie that starred John Cassavetes. Just that's a little trivia note, but I consider Sharky's Machine to be just as great in showcasing what Atlanta was like back in that period. What was it? Was there something about? Besides the state being your good luck charm, was there something about Atlanta that you didn't feel had been tapped into yet in terms of trying?
Yeah, it's a very versatile city, as you know. I mean, you can go down one street and it looks like the 30s or the 20s, and it's fabulous and lights and stuff. Then you go down another street and it's all beautiful and now and very, very, very beautiful in terms of the way it was Billy Fraker, who I love. And he shot the hell out of it, and
he sure
it was just gorgeous. It was just a terrific movie all the way around. I was really proud of it in terms of that kind of stuff, and you don't get it very often.
One of the things I love about it, one of the many things I love about it, is the score, the jazzy kind of score that I thought was kind of new for you.
Yeah.
and also, well, of course, you always have a great coterie of supporting actors with you in a lot of these movies, but particularly in that one with Charles Durning and Brian Keith, Richard Libertini, and James Hampton, John Fiedler, and Bernie Casey. And
yes.
I do want to talk to you about that scene towards the end of the movie where there's lots of chaos going on and the killer is loose, and there's a protracted scene in it where you fit humor into it, like outrageously, with Bernie Casey, continually calling you back for advice, like he's a killer, Sharky, all that stuff. Can you talk about, fitting the humor into that movie just in general? Because I think that's one of the things.
Well, you're great at catching stuff. That was improvised to the hilt because he was a ball player and I was, and he was a great ball player. Played for the Rams and he was a great pro. And he was also just had a body like you couldn't believe these wide shoulders that came down to a 28-inch waist. And I remember Rachel, who was something. Wow, was she something? She was looking at him, and she looked over at me, and she said, "You're hot, but honey, that's something." That was her very first movie.
Yes, she's stunning in it as well. It's such a great movie too, because I really feel like that movie has had a major influence on people in terms of, like, say for instance, like I remember watching it one time and thinking, this must be one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies because it just has that kind of feel, that kind of feel.
He stole the music right out of there.
Yes, he did. I mean, that's right, because he took Street Life and used it for Jackie Brown.
That's right.
Was Street Life written for that movie? Was that because that's?
I think it was.
Okay.
I think it was.
Because that should have been nominated for Best Song too. But another movie from this era that I want to focus in on, and I sense this is also another personal movie because you've had a career as a stuntman and part of your career. But Hooper, directed by your friend Hal Needham. That seems like not only a personal movie for Hal, but also for you. It was that. Every time that I would do something that I was pure Hal, because I'd watched him so many times, and over the years I worked with him for 10 years, starting as a stuntman and then working himself into directing. When I would do something, I wasn't even conscious of it, but I copied his walk. I copied, when I went up on the thing, I slid helicopter,
down, with the dog, and they always have on those pictures. They always have a dog, kind of what they're called, but they're always over the top in terms of us hurting the dogs. Well, nobody loves dogs more than me. But, this guy was really giving me a hard time. And I said, I'm not going to listen, before this dog gets hurt, I'll get hurt. And he said, I hope so. I said, well, thank you.
Again, I want to talk about the character actors that you've had in many of your movies. Of course, we talked about Jerry Reed and Dom DeLuise, but I also want to mention Charles Durning, who was not only in a lot of your movies.
Charles Durning, that was his first big movie, and when I opened the door and he walked in and hugged me, and because we hadn't met before that, we just shot it at that time. And I think we ended up being 5 or 6 movies together.
Yeah.
And him and Dom were the 2 best actors I ever worked with.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. Of course, he's fantastic in almost everything that I've ever seen him in. But he's particularly great to me in Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which he got an Oscar nomination for. And his scenes in that movie are so funny. I mean, it's one of the funniest musical numbers I've ever seen in a movie. People
forget. They didn't forget when they saw it, but he could dance.
Man, he's very light on his. He's very light on his feet.
But he had been in a Broadway show where I think he won an award for it, and it was dancing and singing, and every time I'll tell you, one of the great evenings of my life, I wish you'd have been there, at my house. I used to have parties, and it was amazing the number of people that came. And there was a whole bunch of people there, and I always had a very eclectic group of actors, but good actors, and people that did go to parties together. And it was very, very crowded. And I had a little three-piece band, and Charlie came over to me, and he said, "Would you think I could dance with Fred Astaire?" And I said, I don't know. I don't see why not. And I called him over. I said, "Mr. Astaire," and he was a very shy man. I said, "This man, I don't know if you know it, but Mr. Durning taught at the Fred Astaire dance studio in New York." And he said, "No, I didn't know that." And he said, "Well, there is something that you could do for me." And he said, "Anything." And he said, "Would you dance with me?" And I didn't know what to do or say. And Fred said, "I'd be honored." And I went over to the band and I said, "Would you guys play a couple of dancing melodies for Fred and Charlie?" And they said, "Yeah." And they got together. They started playing, and everybody was dancing. There was a lot of people. They were all dancing. They started playing the music, and the two of them started dancing. And, of course, what happened, everybody moved away from them and just surrounded them. And they danced. I get tears in my eyes. It was one of those magic moments that nobody's ever going to see or film or anything, but what a night.
Wow, that's just incredible. I mean, when I think about your career, you must have met everybody. You know, when you started appearing on TV, of course, you've always been a TV star. You know, since the early '60s, the late '50s, really. But particularly, I think your appearances on Johnny Carson were a major boon for you. That more than anything, Dean. I think it was more than any piece of work I did was with Johnny, and it was not. Nobody believes me, but it was not rehearsed. Neither one of us knew what we were going to say. And after I did the first one, he said, "Will you do the show next week?" And I said, "Sure." And I did like 5 in a row, and we just had so much fun together. And I don't know anybody that I've ever loved more than him, in terms of just not wanting him to walk away from me. I wanted to be around him all the time, and he was just so magic. We had the same kind of sense of humor, whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but he sure had my number, and I had his, and it was rare. It's a great teaming up. In fact, you hosted this show a few times, right? So that's a great sign of confidence in you from him.
Yes,
I would think. Now, I want to get to something, I do want to talk about Dog Years a little bit, your new movie that's coming out, but I do want to touch on something that, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, and this is probably the, most contentious, question I'll ask, but I do want to ask about Boogie Nights, because it was a major comeback role for you. It's a widely loved movie. And of course, it brought you a lot of acclaim and an Oscar nomination and many critics awards and everything. But I know that you're on the record is not particularly loving it too much. Is that does that feeling of it come from the subject matter that it was covering?
Yes, that was it. It was a subject matter. I had a hard time with it. and just in terms of doing it. And I did it, and I'm glad I did it. And the director did a fabulous job. And I was wrong, and he was right, But I just had a really hard time with some of the dialogue, saying some of the words, and because having, like you said, starting out in the late 50s and not saying those words, and they were just verboten, And I don't know, but and I didn't know that I was going to get that kind of acclaim. I had no idea. At that time, I did look him up and told him how much I was full of shit, and he was right. And,
That's interesting. That's good. I mean, I've read somewhere where you haven't seen it all the way through or something, but I would encourage you to go back and take a look at it and take joy in the fact that you really contributed one of the great supporting performances of that era. And whenever you think about the subject matter, it's a movie that's highly critical of that world, I think. So, in that way, I think you can find some kind of common ground in some kind of doorway into actually loving it. And so I would encourage you to go back and take a look at it, because you're just fantastic in it. You're just perfect in it. And in that way, I wonder, do you have any kind of sense of like, well, if I didn't like the subject matter, and I've read that, it was a little contentious on the set, how do you think that you came out with such a great performance?
Well, I think part of it is you get tunnel vision, That's what I was going to do, and I was going to give these guys some kind of credibility, and it's they made movies. There was not a lot of them, but the ones that were good were really good, and good in terms of filmmaking. And that's one speech I had in the restaurant. I don't forget, he just let me go, and he said, because he said, you're a filmmaker, tell people how hard it is, how rough it is to get the money, and to make that, and I don't care how long it is. And I really thought that's a lot of faith that he gave to me there. And I'd work with him again. I don't know if he'd want to work with me again, but I'd like to work with him again.
Well, he asked you to be in Magnolia, and you said you weren't ready for it, huh?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
It was too soon.
I owe it to the listeners to bring up Deliverance, which is, absolutely the watershed movie for you. I know you got injured on the set. It's an injury you're still kind of dealing with.
Yeah, I was. I was really a little crazy because I told John, who I love, John Borman, the best director I ever worked with, I said, John, I look like a dummy going over that waterfall. And he said, well, that's what it is, a dummy. And I said, yeah, I know, but let me do it. And by that time, he thought I could do anything. And he said, okay. So they had some way of turning the waters down to like just a ripple, and then they'd turn it back wide open whenever he asked for it. So they turned it down to like a ripple, and I walked out, and one of the prop guys came out with the two of them, and they drove a spike into a rock, and they put a rope around it, and I put my hand through the rope, and I screamed to John. I said, now when I raise my hand and whirl it around, let it go. And he said, all right. And so I said to the guy, the white water expert, he said, now when you go in, you're not going to be able to swim out because the hydrofoil will just pull you right back. He said, go to the bottom and swim out. And I said, okay. And they let it go, and I remember I heard this noise coming from behind me. It sounded like a tidal wave, and it was. And I looked around, and here it came. And it hit me, and I went flying out in the air. And I came down, I hit a rock, cracked my tailbone, and I did a flip and screwed my ankle up, and then I went to the bottom. I got up and I started to swim out, and just exactly like the guy said, it kept pulling me back. I couldn't swim out, and so I took a deep breath. Thank God I had enough sense to remember what the guy said. Swam to the bottom, and it shot me out of there like a torpedo. I mean, it was unbelievable. And by now, the crew and everybody are getting a little shaky. They don't know where I am or what happened. I went over that waterfall, a 35-year-old guy in the greatest shape of his life, and they didn't see me. They couldn't find me, and I looked down the side of the river, and it was a good half mile, I swear. I saw this nude man, old man, about 85, stumbling along towards them, and it was me. And they all ran down and started bandaging me. I had nothing on. They started bandaging me up, and it was something that I'll never forget. And when you go to the movie and you look at it, I said, "How does it look, John?" He said, "Like a dummy going over the ball."
Oh no!
It didn't look any better than the dummy.
So did you learn a lesson from that? Like,
yes,
let the dummy do it?
Yeah, I know. You don't do things like that.
Yeah. Going into that movie, all of you guys, Ned Beatty and Ronnie Cox and John Voight, you must have known that it was a risky project. I mean, risky physically. I mean, of course there's controls on the set and so forth, but you never know what can happen out there in the wilderness or whatever. That's kind of one of the points of the movie, really. But what was the preparation like for you guys in terms of physically preparing for the role and so forth?
Well, first of all, Ned Beatty's first movie, which is hard to believe because I think he's one of our another performance that should have been nominated for the Oscar. I totally agree, and I say it every chance I get. He should have been nominated, and I think it was because he'd never done a picture before. Nobody had seen him. Mm-hmm. And they've since that time given him much bigger write-ups, but he never has been nominated. Should have been for other things. He just was so damn good. I mean, I couldn't get over him. And one of the funniest things was John was having a terrible time finding the mountain men, and I said, John, I've worked up here a lot of times. And there's a guy I know up here. He can't read or write, but he is that guy that has got Voight up against a tree. I said, that's him. And he says, all right. I said, let me bring him in, and we'll improvise it. He said, does he know what improvise means? I said, yeah, that's the only way he knows how to do it. But I said, please, let's give him a chance. So his name is Cowboy Coward, C-O-W.
Herbert Cowboy Coward, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, he came in, and just like I remember him, just like a country as a peach orchard sow. And he sat down, and he's looking over at John, and the line is, get over there against that tree and take your pants down. So I said, the line, cowboy, is get over against that tree and take your pants down. And he said, you get over against that sapling and take your panties down. And John said, you got the part.
That's it. He knew it was right there. And Bill McKinney, of course, is fantastic in that movie, too.
Bill is wonderful. Yeah, he's done quite a few movies. And he just terrific athlete. But he didn't quite know how to take cowboy, nor did anybody else. They all were sort of scared of him, but he was wonderful.
It's of course it's a masterpiece. The Vilma Sigmund photography, and of course the music and the cast and the direction and James Dickey. I guess I should ask about James Dickey too, because of course he's a character in he plays the sheriff in the movie.
He was not my favorite, and at night we were staying at this big home. They were rented homes, but everybody was gone. It was not the season, so they're all empty. So each one of us had a home, and then there was this big bar, and they brought the bartender in, and that was it. And we go down there every night, and I was sitting there, and Dickie had everybody cornered in a booth talking to him, and they couldn't get out. I could see that. And I was sitting over at the bartender with the bartender shooting the crap, and I looked over, and Voight, who was, just about the nicest human being that ever lived, would sit there and let him talk till the sun came up, if he had to, I guess. But he looked up, he saw me, and he came walking over, and I said, "Oh God!" And he said, "Now, Lewis, how you doing?" I said, "I'm fine, Mr. Dickey." He said, "I got to tell you something. You did a fine job. Fine job." He slapped me on the back of the shoulders, I looked around at him, and I said, "I want to tell you something, all right? I don't want to talk to you. But just get the fuck away from me." And he stood there, and he looked at me, and then he said, "That's exactly what Lewis would have said." And then he walked away. That's probably one of his favorite stories.
I think he's terrific in the movie. I know he was kind of a big drinker. I guess, he had kind of a tortured artist quality to him, right? Every day. He was about from 10 o'clock on. He was sipping the juice. But it would have been interesting to listen to his classes, because I bet he was good. I bet he was a good teacher. Yeah, I'm sure he was. You're right, and I've seen interviews with him and so forth. There's a documentary out there, a little short documentary about kudzu, I think, or something like that he contributes to. That's fascinating. But here's something I always wanted to ask you. Have you ever seen a movie called Sherman's March? Yes. I always wanted. It's one of my favorite documentaries. It's done by Ross McElwee, and of course, just for the viewers, the listeners that don't know about it, it's a story of the filmmaker going through the South and meeting these various women and sort of pining for a relationship, and also doing a documentary about Sherman's March through the South. And one of the women that he meets is a girl that's trying to get a part in one of your movies. And the director makes it a point of trying to get you on camera. And I was just always curious, and he does eventually. He gets a real glimpse of you. He's not able to get anywhere real near you, but I was always curious if you'd ever seen that movie and appreciated it.
I did because I was curious, because they did gone to all that trouble to call me and run me down. I was doing another film, and I was very flattered that they did go to all that trouble. I thought it was a fabulous movie. I thought the guy really knew what he was doing, really knew what he wanted, and there's nothing better than a director who has a passion for what he's doing.
Oh yeah, no question. It's the key. It's the key to making any work great, but movies in particular, because movies are so hard to do. You can never. You might think you have all the ingredients for a great movie, but something in the machinery doesn't work right. And so, to me, movies are like machines. They're machines to create feeling. It could be fear, or it could be love, or it could be joy, or laughter, or whatever. But they're complicated machines, and when they work right, it's almost like you can feel the gears working together. Just by watching it.
It happens. I've done, I don't know how many films, but it's ridiculous, the amount, plus 50 television shows. And when everything comes together, everything gels, you know it. And you don't want it to end. You just don't want it to end. You think, this is magic. And this is what it's all about.
There has to be sort of a melancholy quality about it, too, because you know that they have to end. And when they end, everybody scatters off, and you might not see anybody for many, many years. And I would imagine that's why you gravitated to, actors like DeLuise and Durning and Beatty and Jerry Reed and James Hampton. You wanted to kind of surround yourself with people that you knew you liked, because there's a lot of sitting around time in a film.
That's exactly the way it happened. That's exactly the way it happened. Mm-hmm. And there probably was 5 or 6 other people too like that. You just you know what you're going to get from them, and that's their best, and their best is better than anybody. Especially that Southern thing that they all had.
Mhm. Yeah. You love the South. I mean, you're from the South. Were you born in Michigan, or you were born in?
I was born in Michigan, but we got out of there after 5 years and came down here because my dad came home from the war and came down here for his honeymoon. Came back and said, "We're moving to Florida," and I went, "What?" And I thought alligators in the backyard and all kinds of things, but we came down here, and I've never regretted it. And I suppose that's why I love the South so much, because it adopted me and I adopted it.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're gonna, I just want to let listeners know we're going to talk about Smokey and the Bandit at the film festival in Rome, which is this weekend. So we'll have video footage of the press conference where we'll probably be focusing in entirely on Smokey and the Bandit. But I do want to ask you the question, what is it about Smokey and the Bandit that you think has made it, probably your most iconic role and your most iconic movie?
I think the versatility of it, from being very funny. When it was funny, but it had very tough things. Most of all, what was amazing was to have Gleason. I mean, my gosh, how do you get that lucky?
You were the one who suggested Gleason, were you not?
Oh, yeah. And they said, there's no way you'll get him. And I said, I'll get him. And I called, and he waited about 2 seconds and said, where do you want me? And he was wonderful.
Also a prodigious drinker on set.
Oh yeah, he drove. He did like to drink the sauce, and he had a guy that he yelled for, called Mal, and that was his supposed dresser. But when he said Mal, that meant bring me a glass of vodka, and everybody thought it was water. I knew it wasn't water because he said one sip, and sure. Well, my Lord, straight vodka with a few ice cubes. The only thing he didn't do was put a lemon in there to give it away. But my Lord, can you imagine at 10 o'clock in the morning? And he just kept at it all day. And he never, ever lost a line. He never tripped, skipped anything. You couldn't tell.
I think it's probably a good place to wrap it up because that segs right into the press conference.
Okay, can I ask about dog years real quick?
And, sure. Yep.
Yeah. Let me wrap it up with dog years.
Okay.
Well, dog years is one of those films that I didn't know the director. I don't know how many pictures that he had done out of Rivka, but very few. And he was wonderful. I was crazy about him. I would work with him again in a second. Chevy Chase I hadn't worked with before, but I'd been a big fan. And we had a ball. We had very little scenes together, but we broke each other up all the time. We'll work together again. Ariel was, I didn't like her at the beginning because I thought she was, there's a lot of that cussing that young actresses do that they seem to think that's the thing to do. And she did for about 3 days until finally I took her around behind the barn and I said, look, honey, that doesn't fly with me. And you don't need to. You're too good an actress. Just stop it and watch how much better you are. And she said, oh, well, I thought that was, yeah, I know that's what you thought. That's what somebody did, but they don't. So don't do it anymore, okay? She said, okay. And she stopped doing it, and she was wonderful. And she grew up on that picture. She went from a little girl to a grown-up actress, and she's going to be great.
Rifkin kind of wrote this role for you, did he not? Or
yes, he did. Yeah. He said that if he hadn't gotten me, he would have done the picture. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's sure a great line. And I love the producer.
Doing this movie, because it's very much, mirroring your own, probably your own life these days. Did it get you thinking about the trajectory of your career and maybe?
Yes, it was that. It was too much like that. A lot of people thought it was totally that. It wasn't totally that, but it was closer than anything I've done, I think, in terms of the ups and downs and stuff of, that the way I started. And, I never thought that I'd still be around at this age and still working and doing better work now than I have, I think. And so it was because of Adam and his script. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be around a long time, I hope. I'm going to do a movie called Defining Moments in Toronto next, and that's it's kind of like that.
In that way, and then I'll make this my last question. In your career, can you tell me what the biggest source of pride is, and also what's your biggest regret?
I thought that my biggest regret was going to be striptease, and it didn't turn out that way. It didn't turn out that way, but I I still had. I mean, I had a terrible time getting through it. It just it was a hard picture to make for me, and I didn't like making it. I wasn't crazy about anything doing it or anything, but I did it, and I'm not sorry I did it now. I mean, because people talk about it in a nice way usually. And the best one for me, I think, was starting over, because it was again very, very much about me, and not that I've been in love with two women at the same time a lot, but I have, and it was tough.
You've had many opportunities. Let's just say that.
Yes, I never let an opportunity get by. But it was a good film. I was proud of it. It didn't get the kind of press that I thought it would, but it's still very for people that have seen it, really seen it. They really liked it.
Well, it's a great movie, and you know, I know you have to go, but I will be seeing you this weekend at the film festival, and hopefully, you know, I'll be bringing my Deliverance poster for you to sign, which is also signed by Ned Beatty.
Great.
I met Ned back in '88 in connection with another movie that you did called Switching Channels. And he signed my poster, so I won't tell you how he signed it. I'll just wait to meet you and show it to you, and you'll get a good chuckle out of it. But I just can't tell you what a thrill this is. You've been incredibly generous with your time, and the listeners are just going to adore it. And I just can't tell you how much effect you've had on me as a movie lover. You know, at the drive-ins when I was a kid, major influence on me.
Thank you. God bless you, and I can't wait to see you.